Hi, my name is Kate and welcome to our channel. Today we're going to have a conversation with Dr. Tracy Cooper. He is an international consultant for highly sensitive people, professor of education at Baker University. He is an author of multiple books about high sensitive people, and he is also a co-producer of the recent movie who is going to be released this year together with their Emmy-awarded director Will Harper on Highly Sensitive Men Rising. We're going to have a conversation about highly sensitive children and parents, and also about high sensation seeking highly sensitive children. So I hope you will enjoy the conversation, and if so, don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel. Tracy, thank you so much for being and joining this conversation. And let's before we go make a deep dive into some of the specific topic of high sensitive people and sensory seeking people, etc. I would like for you to explain a little bit for everyone the terms.
Sure, no problem. So a highly sensitive person is a person that has the genetic temperament trait sensory processing sensitivity. It's popularly known as the highly sensitive person, but the scientific term really is sensory processing sensitivity. And it's a genetic trait that's known to be neutral in temperament, so it doesn't imply one thing or another, but it's been around actually since humans have probably been around 1 million years ago or so. We've only really come out with it in the late 1990s with Dr. Elaine Ayer and Dr. Ayer in their research. And so the highly sensitive person, really the trait itself is composed of 4 variables or 4 key aspects. And we like to think of those as the DOES, the DOES, with the D standing for a depth of processing, meaning that we tend to spend more time in reflecting on the things that we experience during the day. So we're taking in more stimulation from everything around us in the environment. So we tend to bounce that around inside of our minds for a longer time than do people that are less sensitive. So that's the D. The O is overstimulation. So we tend to have a lower threshold or a lower bar for feeling as if we're overstimulated or frazzled or maybe irritated and kind of need to withdraw before other people do. So we're really more like a finely tuned instrument, if you will. Our nervous systems are finely keyed in to all inputs from the environment, both the external environment, the interpersonal environment, but also our own interpersonal environment, our own somatic responses, how we feel. So we're really like an electric fence in a way. We're really, anything that touches it, we're registering it. So that's the O. We have that lower bar for overstimulation. The E really stands for emotional responsivity. So we tend to have a broader range of possible emotions. So the way that we experience life tends to be broader and deeper and richer in some ways. We also tend to be high in empathy. So we're generally able to enter the experiences of other people almost as if they were our own and feel those experiences. So when someone is hurting, we can generally tell, even if they aren't necessarily showing it on the surface, we can feel that something is off with that person. We can sense the mood of a room or the mood of a group of people or something being off, or we can also sense when people are really doing well. So we tend to be really good in that way. So the high empathy and the emotional range is the E in the DOES. And the last one is the sensitivity to subtle cues. So along with that kind of exquisite sensitivity to everything in the environment is we tend to notice subtle cues. So we know when things are a little too hot or too cold, or we notice visually when things are a little off, like the word search things like you used to see as a kid, like look, compare this picture to this picture, what's different? We tend to be the people that would be able to pick out those minute differences that other people would totally not get. We tend to enjoy high aesthetic sensitivity, so we enjoy looking at nature, we enjoy being in nature. So because of the subtle cues, things that other people might overlook, we tend to experience in a richer, deeper way. So that's kind of the core of the way the trait works. So we're more sensitive to everything in the environment. It can lead us to overstimulation because we are more sensitive to everything in the environment. We're about 20% of the population overall. And now sensitivity is being thought of as a general trait, which meaning that there's a middle group of moderately sensitive people, about 40%. And there's thought to be a group at the other end, of low sensitivity, that are about 30%. So we are the kind of the top percentage that are highly sensitive. Everybody's sensitive to some degree. We just tend to be in the higher group of high sensitive people. And it serves as a survival adaptation. So an ability to register, process, and respond to stimuli in our environment is kind of an essential quality with living on the planet. That we be able to see what's going on around us and react to that and be able to process it deeply we're able to process it in a more thorough fashion. So we're able to see patterns and think about those things and reflect and hopefully come up with better action plans. We also tend to pause to think. We don't tend to be impulsive. We tend to think things over before we do them. So structure can work well for us. We also tend to like autonomy. It tends to be really important for us. In terms of careers and things, they tend to run the gamut, but we tend to be involved in the helping professions. So educators and healthcare and people like that, creatives, who also tend to be highly creative. So highly sensitive people are a necessary part of the human population. It's intended by nature. It's non-pathological, so it's not a disorder of any type that needs treatment. It's not something you can treat. We are predisposed, though, because of that kind of exquisite sensitivity and that deeper processing, we are predisposed to somewhat of anxiety. So the things that might make us feel frazzled can also make us anxious. So it kind of follows at the same time. But when it's balanced and managed and you understand yourself well, then you can really take advantage of the giftedness of the trait. So moving on to sensation seeking, what is a high sensation seeker? That's kind of a separate trait altogether, a separate genetic trait. That was kind of elucidated by Dr. Marvin Zuckerman and his team in the late 1960s. So sensation seeking is kind of a trait that works by 4 different aspects. The first of which is thrill and adventure seeking. So those tend to be people that like an adrenaline rush from doing something physical. The second aspect is novelty and new experience seeking. So traveling to new places, trying new things, that kind of thing. A lot of highly sensitive people tend to like that. Boredom susceptibility. We tend to have a lower threshold, just as HSPs have a lower threshold for overstimulation. High sensation seekers have a lower threshold for boredom, which is kind of a crazy thing, but that threshold is lower for us. And so we tend to be bored by situations that are repetitive or routine or uninteresting. And that's a real challenge of the trait itself. The last one is disinhibition. So sensitivity, if sensitive people are a little more inhibited, a little more about pausing to think, disinhibition is kind of the opposite of that. It's like going ahead and to have the thrill of the experience itself. So sensation seeking is a little more prevalent in men than it is in women. I should say also that sensitivity is equally divided between men and women, but there's more men that are thought to be high sensation seeking than women. And maybe it's something to do with our cultural notions at the same time that perhaps it's more approved of. Sensation seeking is not necessarily about risk taking. You can be a sensation seeker and not necessarily be a high risk taker. The way that the two traits cross over, that is that there are, we know now that there are about 50%, up to 50% of highly sensitive people who are also high in sensation seeking. And again, it comes down to self-knowledge. So understanding those traits, that you have those traits and kind of how they function, and then seeing how they played out in your life and which one tends to win out, if one tends to win out. Sometimes the sensation seeker tends to bowl over the sensitive person. That can be a challenge because it can lead to burnout and it can lead to a lot of problems. So when you're able to balance the two, you have high creativity, you have stimulation coming from the high sensation seeking part. That gives the highly sensitive part something to reflect on, something to think about, and something to create new inventions for. We tend to be great innovators. And a lot of the people, I think, that are movers and shakers amongst the highly sensitive people tend to be high in sensation seeking also. Because it's hard for us to sit still, it's hard for us to not do something new. We're always looking for the new, the novel, the exciting. It's not the same thing as ADHD, which has much more of a focus on a lack of focus and an inability to focus for a period of time. Highly sensitive people tend to be able to focus quite well for an extended period of time if it's something that they're very interested in. So not the same thing at all, but they can be quite successfully managed. But again, it comes down to education. It comes down to some amount of getting to know the traits, and then some amount of negotiation in your life so that you build a life that really works for you. High sensory intelligence, I should say, is another way of describing the highly sensitive person. It's not used by everybody, but it is just another way to describe highly sensitive people. Some people find that a more descriptive phrase, a more acceptable descriptive phrase. Sometimes highly sensitive person can be thought of as a weakness in a way by some people in society, and some people don't want to be identified that way. So they've come up with high sensory intelligence as a way of thinking about, okay, this is what it enables. right? It's a form of intelligence. We're not saying gifted. We're saying it's a form of sensory intelligence that allows you to register, process, and respond to all stimuli that you take in, whether the external environment, the interpersonal environment, or your own somatic environment. So high sensory intelligence is a way of making use of all that stimulation and all that processing. So it's a way of making better plans, a way of putting them into practice in the world. So with children, you're really working to build that high sensory intelligence. And again, it comes through that growth orientation throughout life. So it's something you're never done working on. It's something that you're going to encourage throughout your life and throughout their lives as well. And hopefully you're able to pass that on.